Okay, now it's going.
Hey, welcome to the virtual brown bag meeting. Um, so again, as always, let's do a reminder on how this works. So if you go to the website virtualbrownbag.com, you'll find a participant link, which is meeting.virtualbrownbag.com. I'm sorry, the observer link. You can go ahead and join and watch the meeting through there. If you'd like to participate in the meeting, you should join our Slack and hit up the participant link that is in the Slack room. And then you'll be able to join and participate, and we can have up to 10 people at a time do that. For anyone else, you can always submit Q&A questions, and we'll try to keep an eye out on those. A reminder, these are recorded and auto-posted to YouTube, so don't share anything that's going to get you in trouble at work or so on. And that's it. So, hey, everyone.
Hey.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, we were talking in the chat that maybe that we should talk about maybe TDD today,
Yeah.
which I'm happy to do because it was my suggestion.
Yeah. Also, like to discuss. So last time, Jed, we had a good pairing session, and I had a blast with it. And this one reminded me of like why I like doing the VBB and stuff. I like trying new techs or frameworks and get someone who knows what they're doing and pairing. And I think there's a lot of learning that can happen on for everybody. So I'd like to see more of that, and I think it'd be cool to start doing some other little tiny projects that we just open source, and so like live pairing and stuff. So that was sort of what I want to talk about, George, but didn't have time.
Yeah.
But like we just pick different things and go, okay, let's build an API using whatever, and like
let's discuss that toward the back end of the meeting.
Yeah, just want to put it out there.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. So test-driven development, I guess it would have been a good idea to come up with a list of questions or to have a speaker or something like that. But I think of us, I think JB, Claudio, y'all are big advocates of test-driven development. I know who else was participating here is. No. Nobody else is a big
Claudio, Claudio doesn't like tests. He hates them.
Yes.
Screw tests.
Yeah, right.
If I never test my code, then I never have failing tests.
Yeah. So I presume everyone else is just interested and wants to learn more about TDD. So that's cool, and I guess like if you have any questions, lob it up since we don't have any concrete schedule. Let's start with this though. Of the people that are big proponents of TDD, let's assume JB, Claudia, and I can speak to this a little bit. What is test-driven development to you, and what is the main benefit?
I think for me it was that leap, from going to, I have no tests whatsoever. I always go to the console and I instantiate my class and I call methods on it and I make it print to the console to see if it works, right? And of course that's not repeatable. And then like over 10 years ago when I came to a conference, I saw somebody talking about unit testing. I said, oh, okay, oh, all right, that's automating what I do in the console. That's pretty cool. I'll start doing that. Right, so I started like writing tests like this, not really writing unit tests per se. I was just writing stuff to test a whole bunch of crap, but at least it was automated. And then, just at that point figuring out, oh, you know what, my classes are doing a little bit too much, because if I'm changing this one thing here, like maybe I dropped a column of a table on the database, now 80% of my tests are failing. Well, I think this is not really how I should do it, right? And then starting to learn. All right, maybe I should break dependencies so I can test those individually. And then I got into TDD from somebody saying, oh yeah, you start from writing the test first so that you make sure that the code that you end up with is really just the code that you actually need in production. I said, all right, that's good. I'll buy that. And then eventually, at some point, like a lot of people, I realized, well, I'm starting to think way too much about the class that I'm writing as opposed to the behavior that I'm trying to implement. And that's why when I've made the leap to the whole BDD, thinking, okay, not only will I write the test first, but I will write the test thinking about the behavior and not what class I'm going to actually end up building in order to implement that behavior, right? Because before that, I was essentially going with the, one spec per class or one test file per class as opposed to going by behavior. And then, sometimes we think, well, I'm going to have this one class, and then as you implement the behavior, you start breaking up that class into smaller classes, and then at that point, it doesn't make sense to have one file per class, implementation class. So nowadays, I'm not even sure if I say, well, I'm doing TDD, I'm doing BDD, I'm just thinking about, what is it that I need to actually implement from the end user's perspective, and then I write tests for it. And then sometimes I end up having a test that's really more of an integration test because I'm trying to figure out the feature per se. Once I figure that part out, I start breaking things apart into, okay, now let me remove all this mocking that I did and start creating smaller services and whatever else. And then from that point on, I go more into a TDD fashion now that I got all the behavior type of thing out of the way. So, I mean, I think I just threw a bunch of stuff out there because, again, it's been a while since I've actually talked to anybody about TDD, BDD, and I'm like, I just sit down and write a test.
Right. I know you, and me too, also, we used to, speak about it at conferences and stuff like that. It just gets old after a while.
Well,
yeah, I was gonna say it's hard for us since we've been doing this for so long. We know the benefits. We just it's inside of us right now. So it's kind of hard to make people who are not into it to make them understand why this is important. Because again, whenever I get to talk about this, I'm like, okay, let me remember. Oh yeah, it was 2003 when I went to see somebody talk about unit testing. It's like, it's been a long time, and going through all these iterations of understanding automated testing, unit testing, integration testing, test first, TDD, BDD, and just a lot of iterations. We cannot go through all of them with everybody. We just end up just talking about, oh yeah, you just write your test.
Yeah. So wait, so JB, what about you? What is the big advantage of test-driven development for you? Like, what you would say?
So TDD is always a loaded term. So I write tests. I don't do TDD because TDD to me is a protocol almost, like it's a way, like this is how you write the code, and I think it's good practice when you're first learning to go through stuff, and there's some benefits to it, but I don't have that discipline to the point that I feel that there's value in it. But I do think it's important to write tests. I think that's one of the key when some groups were like, hey, we're going to switch to TDD, and it's like, do you write tests? And like, no, that's the point. We're going to start writing tests. I was like, well, don't do TDD. Just do tests. Just write them. And before you get into like what's right and what's wrong and how to write them, whether you mock or you don't mock or all this other stuff, just write the tests. Just write them. And like the thing is, you can read about 10,000 million books and go all the stuff about how to write tests. And guess what? If you did not read those books and you just wrote tests, you'd come to the same conclusions, because testing is good. The pain points you're going to run into is going to be exact same, like inversion of control and dependency injection, all this stuff are things you're going to discover when you're writing tests. Like, oh God, I need this because this is, there's all this fragileness and I'm testing too much. So testing in a way will make you write better code just by writing tests. The value of it to me, it's a long-term play. That's the hard part. Is each individual test that you write, when you write it, a lot of times seems silly and straightforward, and there's not a lot of value. The value comes when you've been doing it regularly, and it's weeks and months down the line as a team, and you have a large test suite. Because then when you make a change, you can go forward with confidence that like you identify where it breaks stuff. Like today, we were changing something, and I'm like, I wonder, this is a pretty big change. I wonder if we broke anything. When discussing as a team last night, we were like, I don't think it's going to affect anything. We should be okay. And then I just ran test suite, and it's like we got 20 failing tests. So yeah, it affected things. It broke stuff. So now I have ways I can identify how to fix it.
So for me, oh, sorry. Go ahead. You are finished.
Yep. So one thing about the testing, Jared got a good point from the Slack channel. Is there a difference between these different languages? Because some individuals, front-end engineers or developers, as George really likes, the new ones are just nothing but JavaScript really. So it's different languages have different stuff, and we've been old crotchety general full stack guys, so we know the languages are different. You have different testing cultures and different ability to test between different languages because some things are easier than others. Ruby and Elixir I think Ruby in particular is really easy to test, and Elixir I haven't that much problem with that testing. And C#, it's probably gotten a lot better and stuff, but there's more challenges to C# in certain things than Ruby. And JavaScript in particular. One of the reasons why I don't think there's a huge testing culture of JavaScript is because JavaScript is, by my definition, is very difficult to test. Just because just the way the language is, and it's getting better because of Babel and ES6 and all this other stuff. But like, even then, like pulling up Karma or Phantom.js and trying to test Jasmine, even a browser, and all these other crazy things and put there, it's difficult to test JavaScript, and that's one of the reasons why I think JavaScript doesn't have as strong of a test culture, just because it's hard. And so,
JB, you barely write JavaScript.
Dude, you don't even know, man. You know, every time, every project, everything I go, I just want to be the back-end guys, man. I just want to do the back-end. And then it ends up being like I'm the front-end person because like I can do the JavaScript, I can put all the stuff there, and I actually I care about the styling and stuff. And while I don't think I'm that great at design, better than the average bear, I guess. So, and I end up going, I hate this stupid language. Why am I writing JavaScript?
So I want to bring up a point, because what happens with me a lot of times, there was that whole debate a while ago about how much do you actually want to do TDD, which is a good thing to get into. But before I get into that, so I don't always write tests. Lots of times the code is I'm like, this code is trivial. I'm not going to bother with this. When I find it of huge importance is when I don't know exactly what I need to be doing, and what exactly the code needs to be doing, and I'm kind of an idiot, so that's kind of a lot. Just the other time, well, actually yesterday, it was implementing a timer for a basketball game, and okay, well, a timer needs to, you need to be able to hit pause. To hit a timeout, and there's two different types of timeouts that you can hit, and what happens to a shot clock exactly. The shot clock switches by itself, and what happens exactly to a timeout when, to the shot clock during the timeout, all sorts of stuff like that. So, I mean, literally my process is to just, and I tried to implement that without tests, and I just got for like a day and got nowhere. I got so confused. So my process was this is the tool that I have on my shelf for when I get down in the weeds like that, and it's literally sitting down, writing out just some stories of how this should flow. Okay, so given that you have periods that are 8 minutes long, a shot clock is 35 seconds long, and these are the timeouts, after 8 minutes, after 5 minutes have elapsed, the period time should read 3 minutes, but then if you pause it, and then 6 minutes elapsed, it should still say 3 minutes. And I write that out. I write it out in strings. So my current, this is in C# in my case, but same thing. But my current framework of choice is XBehave on XUnit, but it super doesn't matter, it turns out. So, and then after that, I just start writing some sort of code for it. But for me, when I get into that mode, I actually have the full thing that I'm trying to do, because it's a full workflow, at least a happy path workflow, through it before I start writing tests at all. It's and really, like, I would say probably 60% of the time in my process is taken up, maybe even more than 60% of the time is taken up not by writing the code, but writing the initial kind of English language thing and figuring out how it should flow and going back and be like, wait, that doesn't actually make sense what is happening here. And once I have that all written, just putting code behind it is like maybe 30% of the time, and then like actually implementing the code is like 10% of the time, and the implementation ends up being like 20 lines of code. And it's like, oh, okay, that's the I feel dumb. That's what I needed to do all along, but I tried for a day and I couldn't think of these patterns until I got it straight in my head in this way, which I would have needed to do anyway. So that's the big benefit to me, is just being able to take a complex set of requirements that you can't really think through the timings and the state transfers by yourself, and getting that down. And then, I mean, the automating thing is almost a minor thing after the fact.
I kind of like the comment that George made about trying to like come up with what he wants to build, and that kind of forces you to think of the test first. Because how do I test that if I'm using, say, Cycle.js, a new framework that came out, is getting the job done? I have to test it manually. So it's the same thing. I have to think of how to. So I was building this app, Conference Room Booker, that lets you visually see a bunch of rooms and then book one, like a conference room for a couple of hours, and then see it change color gradually and then fade out to white once the room has been free again. And like, how do I set up, how do I get started with that? So even when I was doing it manually, I was thinking the test first. So I kind of do like TDD, because when I tell people to get started, and by the way, I'm very happy there's people here that have been testing since 2003. I've been testing since 2006. And I'm not really the oldest, so that's great. But one note is, when I teach people TDD is easier for learning tests than not TDD, because TDD, you only write as much code to pass the test that you wrote. So you write very simple tests, whereas if I give somebody code that's like a page of like 20 methods, and like each method is like 15 lines of code, how do you test that? That's so overwhelming, it scares the hell out of people, makes them not test and not write tests. Whereas TDD is, you write tests first, and then you write only enough code to pass the test. So then the code coverage issue goes out of the window. There's never an issue with code coverage with TDD, because you're always 100% covered, because that's exactly how you write the implementation, is just to cover your test, and not more and not less. So I mean, I've been with my project right now. My client was a bit not very open to testing, but now we're kind of getting them to buy into testing more and be like, okay, this actually saves us time, because they have like 5 different components in a Rails app, like a Rails application and 5 engines that are all interacting with each other. And when one breaks, everything else breaks. And I mean, there might have been architectural issues, but then tests kind of reveal those architectural issues and force us to write better code. So we're starting to write more tests. So I'm starting to get back into it after having worked with them for 2 months with no tests. So yeah, I find this brown bag interesting.
Well, Seth asked a question about whether testing TDD changes our overall anxiety level with our coding at all. And I'd say yes. And I think it's just also, I'm just a big testing guy. And so one of the things, like if I can't test certain stuff, and I get anxious on it, because I'm like, I know my code's not good. Like, I need something to verify that it's working as I intended. Yeah, when I have a full test suite on it, I feel confident in it. And my metric always, in terms of how do I know if the test suite's pretty good or like it's doing what we need to do, is when a bug comes in and I can reproduce the bug in a test and then fix it. That's when I'm like, we're good. This is how it should be. Like, if I have a bug, I should be able to reproduce it in a test, then fix it, and that's how I go, yes, we're set up right. When I can't do that, I'm like, and I had to click through the app to verify I fixed the bug, we're sort of in a bad state, and I'm not happy.
And I think that goes a little bit to Seth's question from the chat. Has it increased your anxiety level? So yeah, that's totally worthwhile. Again, by the time I mean, yes, breaking existing tests is nice when you get notified of that. But if it was just that, like, it doesn't come up nearly often enough for me on consulting projects for it to have been worth it all on its own. But what it does do for me, especially like at the point where you get a little bit of practice, is when I have this big intractable problem, like, okay, if I do this in a TDD way, it makes it, I know that I can finish it within 2 days. I know it because, especially once I write all the actual steps out, at that point I'm like, okay, well, okay, so that took me a day to figure all that out. I know it's going to take me like probably another half a day to figure out how to actually just implement each of these steps as a test. And then like another like hour and a half to actually just run it. So that's the level, that's the anxiety that it removes from me. I don't even know how to start with this anxiety, or I don't know how to estimate this anxiety. Um,
So George, you shared this image. You want to talk at all through this?
Yeah, so a while ago, I created this image. I did a talk to some of our salespeople just explaining, talking about automating testing in general. This is just like a little Venn diagram that I made of how I view it. So we've got kind of unit testing, integration testing, and QA. And I would say, like, unless you take a very broad understanding of QA, uh, they don't really overlap too much. I have them here not overlapping at all, but maybe I wouldn't be so bold with that. But then test-driven development, it is certainly part of unit testing, but you could certainly do it with integration to testing too. Like, there's no reason why you can't do test-driven development where you're actually automating your application. And then I view behavior-driven development. Then this leads into like another thing I'd like to talk about, as a subset of test-driven development, just a different way of thinking of it. So kind of like what I'm saying, where I really write out a full story first, and so when I'm sitting down to actually implement the test, it's really not just, I'm implementing like 4 or 5 tests at a time, because like I'm implementing the entire story, and that's like the unit that I'm thinking of, as opposed to test-driven development. A lot of people that do it oftentimes are thinking kind of on level of the method, the level of the class, and then within that we have executable specifications, which is what I think a lot of people mean when they some people that I've talked to mean when they say behavior-driven development, and that is specifically when I'm generating requirements that can be read by the business people just from my tests, and possibly even having them write it, though I don't think that that's necessary for that. I haven't actually seen any business people that can write requirements that actually get executed, and I know that that's more common in Ruby and so on, but but I think that there is a difference between that, because BDD, it's more for you. An executable specification, I think, is for someone else.
So why do you say it's more into Ruby? Because I think you've sold or bought the marketing, because that's not true.
What
I learned it with Java.
Because I'll tell you straight up, like, you get Ruby people together, and after a while you go, you know what sounded like a great idea? It turned out to be a terrible idea. Cucumber.
All right, but that is where Cucumber is from, isn't it?
I know, but it's like it looks cool and the idea is great, and you're like, yes, this will solve all our problems. And then you implement it and go, this is terrible. We're out.
None of the business people want to do it, and now you're yeah.
Yeah. Now we're like, why are we writing regex expressions to parse to write this test when no one's reading these things? I don't know. We hate our lives. That's not about right.
I mean, I've worked on teams where Cucumber was quite successful in communicating ideas among developers as was what the high-level requirements were. Even if the business people didn't end up writing them, us writing them, and then me coming back and maintaining them, I understand exactly what the page of form that's like a tax form, whatever form is supposed to do for the user. So much easier than reading unit tests, because unit tests are very fine-grained. like, okay, this tiny part of the page is supposed to, okay, you enter text, and it's supposed to convert this text into 2 other fields and then pop it on the screen. That's like, okay, I can read all of those, but like Cucumber gives me the high-level view of the entire thing. So I don't want to say, people call it Capybara more nowadays for whatever reason. I think that's the technology behind it, but I don't know. Over the last year, I've been consulted. I mean, I used to consult online on CodeMentor.io. I've been consulted a few times about it, so I know it's not gone. Like, I know people use it. I don't know. Any other opinions on? Well, maybe George, you were going to talk more about that behavior-driven development. I mean, I'd be curious to hear other people's opinions as well.
Yeah. That's
my
what
experience
I
has been positive, but even though I really hated it when I first started learning it, I used to think it was useless for a year, to be honest. So yeah. I'm with you, Jonathan. Was it you who said that?
Yeah. But that's kind of I want to draw a line between BDD and executable specification, which maybe people don't agree with. But when I've had like difficulty, I've disagreed with people about the term before. I think that's what it's bubbled down to, but I don't know. What is your guys' thoughts?
I'm with you on that. Yeah, they're not the same thing.
Yeah, they're a subset. But you capture it inside there. That's why it can be easy to see that a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. The same sort of thing.
All right.
I want to point this out, George. Like, your unit testing logo is a cube.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to show you some software that's well tested right here. This is some well-tested software. Look at all the unit everywhere. Even that pig is well-tested.
I do remember. It took me like an hour to find icons for everything.
So there you go. Now I completely derailed the conversation.
Well, Claudio sounded like he was going to say something.
Yeah, go Claudio.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, when we developers, we talk about this, we talk, a lot about like the languages, how we are writing this stuff, but I have to say that the biggest win for me on this whole deal was to just learn how to frame questions to my clients and users, QA people, BA type of people, to understand what the thing is. And I keep telling them, look, if I do not understand what it is that you want or why is it that you want, I'm not going to write code, right? Like George said, well, I write down the specs so that I understand what exactly I'm trying to build. That's what I tell my users. So if they say, oh, I want to be able to edit that information, I will not do that. I'll always say, why? Why exactly? Oh, that's just because that's how we do it. Why? Right? Because several times, if I don't insist on asking them, why do you want this exactly? Don't tell me that, oh, this is how we used to do in the old system. This is how our boss wants. No, I want to, oh, it's your boss who's asking. Let me talk to him. Let me understand why he wants you to edit that information. Maybe it's not really the action that you need to do is not to edit that information. It's to do something else. So as I started learning more, thinking more through this, and then talking this way to my end users and everybody, we started collaborating a lot better, right? Because then when I'm writing through my specs, I can always walk to BAs, QA type of people and say, look, this is my interpretation of this thing that you are telling me, right? So if I can just like write out, even on a piece of paper, something in that format, in order to get some benefit as a type of user, I want to do whatever, right? And then I lay down the context using, given, when, then, with the, the simplest form of English that I can find, and I can get people to understand that, they will start talking back to me in that way, because they start learning that if they just ask me, look, I need you to do this, I'll ask them why. Right? Why exactly do you need that? What is the business value of that? How is that going to help you in your workflow? How is it going to help you do your job better? So that's, out of the whole, testing, BDD, all that stuff, I think what really helped me a lot is thinking more through, what is the actually the business. I don't care about the language, the cool frameworks and all that. That will be cool when I'm actually writing the code, but way before that, it's more important for me to understand the business. I think that was the biggest lesson for me.
So, I think we've got at least some people on the call who don't do TDD. I think I think the next thing that I think would be benefit them is to talk maybe about how to get started if you don't do TDD.
Maybe like JB said, just start writing the tests. you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Getting the test environment's hard.
yeah.
I was going to share later on if we want. Like, I finally got this test environment set up for some React stuff. It's pretty cool, and it makes a big difference. It'd be like, oh, now this is suddenly why, like, oh, you can actually write tests and stuff, and it's awesome.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So what you just said has two subtle implications on it that don't hold for people who who haven't done unit tests. First of all, knowing how to set up a test environment, which is freaking hard.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm so excited because I finally got it working in JavaScript. It's hard in JavaScript.
And secondly, I think knowing what is appropriate to test, it's easy to say, well, yeah, you're starting out, test everything, but we've got real-world constraints and deadlines and so on, so knowing what is appropriate to test, given that those are real constraints that we totally have. And I think that we should try, if we want to give actual advice, as opposed to just like the same stuff everyone can hear everywhere else, we should try to keep those two things in mind.
I mean, in reference to what you said, George, I think you obviously know that I don't do test-driven development. I primarily do JavaScript, PHP, and I do some Xcode stuff. I also do a lot of .NET languages, but those tend to be smaller projects and more internal stuff, which probably should be tested. But most of the stuff that I would use in a larger, like for client, like I've shown you some of my code, I tend not to, I guess, know where to start. On Xcode, I know there is a unit testing suite, but Xcode always seems like the biggest pain in the butt to deal with anything, much less trying to get unit tests running in there. So, I mean, I guess JavaScript, I guess Jonathan was saying he started getting some, getting into or getting a testing suite working for JavaScript. If you could sort of give me some pointers or starting spots for that, that'd be pretty good to know.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can share a little bit of what I'm doing, but what you hit on is the same thing about, is it different between different languages? Yes. iOS, like Objective-C and Swift and Xcode, I know many good people. If Mark was here, you get a test. He's a big testing guy. He got an Xcode land. He kept on trying to do it, and it's hard. He knows it's hard, and so a little bit different. This is important to me for testing. JavaScript is hard too, but getting this right took forever, and it's just weird. And it's one of those, like, I Webpack over the last 4 days has been driving me freaking crazy, and but I added it all together and I have it there. So, all right, so on the right hand side is my test suite running. I'm using Mocha. I like Mocha versus all the other test JavaScript frameworks. Anyone else has a preference, or to me Mocha is awesome?
That's fine. Mocha or Jasmine might be a little easier to start with just because it includes assertions, which Mocha does not. But the difference is so slight.
But so
it's not worth getting involved. Like as long as you don't do JS unit, you're fine, or Q unit, you're fine.
Well, don't start wars, George.
I'm not. It's just, but those are different. Mocha and Jasmine are not different.
There's a guy who's watching, and he does Angular 1 and Q unit, and he's like, I hate that George guy. He's wrong.
I'm saying Angular.
So with Node, obviously you can have scripts that you can run, and it's good to have a test one. So if I'm running Mocha, so if I just did it by myself, let's see if Mocha works. Yeah, it's not gonna like me. Yeah, because the reason why it's not gonna like it is because I'm using ES6 with Babel, so I have to direct it to use the Babel compiler. This is telling it to watch, so as I make code changes, it will automatically run my test suite. And then this line here is I have a brief setup. So this is saying, hey, before you run all the tests, here's some things I want to set up. This is so that you can put things on the global namespace or kickstart a database or do all sorts of other bootstrappy thingies. If we look into one of these specs, we can see. Here's a little comment. I'm using Visual Studio Code because I kind of like it. It's IntelliSense is really hot and awesome compared to, I'd say, like WebStorm. Always to me, there's a little lag, when you type, and WebStorm is to me feels the worst. Atom is getting to the point where I don't like it either, but I do want like cool little features like IntelliSense and stuff. Visual Studio Code has been crisp. I'm been very happy.
Once they get their Vim plugin story together,
I was just about to ask, does it have a Vim plugin?
It has two, and they both are awful.
Okay, they do have plugins. It's still very early. I can tell like it's growing with stuff, but I've been very happy with it. And I know I can probably achieve the same experience in Atom or Sublime, but I've never been able to quite get there, and it's probably because I just am not configuring the extensions right or whatever. But that's pretty neat. Since I'm using ES6, I can then use all the import syntax. I can then import from Howdy. So this is my Howdy. Let's add another message. Say, say greeting. We'll just have a function. I'll return here. And actually, let's do TDD. Let's do one without TD, and we'll show another one that is TD. So here I'd be like, hi, dude. And now inside, you see there that it's updating, it's running. I can just say it should return a greeting. And I can say here, the message is equal to howdy dot, what was it, say greasy. Look at this IntelliSense. I was like, I don't remember the name of the function. I was about to switch over. And now I'm like, that's so nice. You tell me what is in my JavaScript class. Equal message to, what's it, say hi dude, right? Or something like that. So it passed. Let's see it fail. And then we can see here it fails. Look how fast that is. Getting it right. It feels so good when you get the test suite right. So if we were going to do this TDD, let's do a different one. TDD, you do the test first. So we should say should turn a, I don't know, cool number. We'll make a function that does that. And we'll have number is equal to howdy dot, or say cool number. We're going to assert equal, the number should be equal to 42. And so we can look here, it fails, and now TDD, we go do the minimal amount of thing to get this thing to pass. And to get this to pass, we come here and just say get cool number. Obviously, this code is not like complicated, and so you'd be like, that's really nice. Now it's show like, okay, now it's actually talking to the database and do other stuff. Obviously, I don't have anything planned for that. But not only does this Mocha thing work and it's really fast, and it can do this stuff with, like I have things that use React for it. So here, like I'm actually rendering static markup, and I can see this. I also have Wallaby working too. So that took forever to get right, but it's freaking cool too. So it's thinking about it. That's what this little guy right here. It's spinning up the server.
So in this test I'm looking at right now, are you trying to test like templating?
Yeah. So I'm taking the component, and I'm just saying when you pass these properties in, this is what the result comes out to be. Okay. So here, like you pass in a title, and I want to say that hey, they should have H1 with this title. We'll have more, like not in this project, but in other projects, actually have it tied into with Redux, and so that I actually can mock out server calls and stuff, and it comes back, and I say, hey, this is what it should work and look at. In fact, I might pull one up in a bit that they can show this. I want to make sure that there isn't any proprietary information. It was a throwaway project anyway, but you would test things like, hey, when you load up this component, that it should make this action request, and when you receive this action request, I can mock a return back, and once that return comes back, it should show these list of things. But yeah, that's anyway. With Wallaby, you have the little green sidebar stuff. That's what George showed, and you can then be like, hey, over there, and it'll mark and say, hey, these are failing tests, and if I go inside here, it will let you know that, hey, you have, for this code here, there's some failing tests associated with it. So it's pretty cool. I'm glad I got that going. Where did I put it?
So I'd like to show a slightly different approach that I actually, so more kind of what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me show my screen. Because Dan, I know, like, for example, y'all are, and this isn't even going to run, like, you're doing a lot of video conferencing software. Y'all can see my Atom right now?
Yeah.
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 Okay, so I know, video conferencing software, so you probably have to do with like disconnects. So maybe, so thinking through this, I would do something, I would write out, this is literally how I would start. I would think something like, okay, when you have an ongoing conference call, let's say if, uh, we'll say 5, or we'll say 2 seconds have passed, uh, and let's say, okay, let's say if 2 seconds have passed without receiving a signal, uh, if then you receive a signal, um, then they'll say then don't notify of disconnect. But on the other hand, if 1 more seconds passes without receiving a signal, then notify of disconnect, restart, retrying connection, and I would say something like, okay, because we're assuming then it's retrying the connection, when 1 second has passed, retry connection once if, or we'll say retry has failed when, so now it's doing exponential backup when 2 seconds has passed. Retry connection once more. And maybe I'll write a little bit like that, more of this. So first of all, one thing to notice is even if this is exactly where I leave it, and even if I spelled things correctly, let's assume that. But even if this is like where I leave it, like this is still like totally valuable, right? Like you want to put this in your README file probably or something, because this is like valuable stuff. This is a description of how a workflow in your application works in a way that's much easier to understand than by reading your code. The next step from there is to say, okay, how hard is it to actually start converting bits of this to code, right? But even if you don't, you're still doing test-driven development so long as you actually verify against these conditions, even if you're doing manually. That's step one. To just
Yeah, I mean, that's what I essentially do.
Right. Right.
Like
So,
this is a test, I guess, because I'm running that code and I'm testing it like just
Right.
in the page to make sure it's like giving me feedback or working properly.
right, but having this written down in a format like this, I think that's the part that's really key. So now, okay, let's change this to JavaScript. So now learning the, let's say you sit down, you read the, you read about how to do Mocha testing, and we'll leave this part off for now, and I'll get rid of that because that's breaking everything. Okay, so when you have an ongoing conference call, we're going to have to say something like that current call equals create current call, or we'll say whatever, create call. So I would write that maybe something like that, which means I would have to go down here and create a function just so that it doesn't flat out break. And then we will say maybe current call dot start, right? And now we're going to need, okay, if 2 seconds have passed without receiving a signal. So how might that work? Well, let's go ahead and put that in the describe block again, because we've read the Mocha documentation, we've done a couple of tutorials, understand, okay, this is just, we're saying this is a thing that happens, this is not an assertion. So it's something like that. And then you're saying, okay, well, so I guess what we're going to need to do here is we need some way to elapse 2 seconds, and that means we also need a way to communicate a signal to there that a connection is of signal. So that means that at this point we have to kind of start thinking about how stuff is working inside of create call and how do we elapse 2 seconds. Well, maybe then we just Google and say, okay, how do you mock time? And there's a library called Synon which will do it. And I don't even remember exactly how it works, but I think it's like something like you do before each Synon use fake timers.
Yeah, be cohesive.
After
What about like a cocktail?
Stop fake timers, something like that. And now you say Synon dot elapse or tick for seconds. I don't remember exactly how it works, but it doesn't matter. There you go. I mean, like this stuff, you could write it yourself just by like stubbing out what set timeout does. And that's really all it's doing, right? Stubbing out set interval and set timeout, and then just kind of keeping track of it internally. So, assuming that you don't receive a signal, right? So describe that. Well, if you're not receiving a signal, that's easy. That means nothing happened. So then the question becomes, how do you notify of disconnect? If you receive a signal. So then we're going to say before each, we'll say, so here's where it's going to get interesting. Say something like ping monitor dot ping, right? Which means we need something up here called ping monitor. Ping monitor. Oh, ping monitor equals ping monitor. I don't know. And then that'll be one of the things that we pass into there, because it's going to have a ping monitor that it's watching. And then we'll say don't notify of disconnect, so maybe something like notifications dot last disconnect notification expect to be null, or whatever the syntax is.
So you're an expector guy.
I don't know. I don't really care. Assert to be null.
I like asserts, just because the expector gets ridiculous, all these little chains, and you're like,
yeah,
it doesn't matter, just assert something.
Yeah, I don't really care. Notifications equals no. All right, and actually we can put all of these in the same line. So we could do notifications equals create notifications. Okay, so we're going to pass that in, and that means okay. So then we're expecting that to be null. And then I don't think it makes sense to implement any of this until you implement this condition too. So to describe if one more second passes, so then we're saying, here we go. And no, then we're going to say and then so to, I don't know, not be null, right? And then whatever that has. So now that we have this, okay, that's just a matter of, we can run this test. I obviously don't have anything set up for it, but literally point Mocha at it or just load it up in a web page and just have it run. But now we have our create call function that we've got to create. And we have our create notifications, which honestly are really simple. Create notification just returns an object with the last disconnect notification. Create ping monder is just anything that has a ping method, right? It's just something that returns that. And I personally don't like to use new, but whatever, it doesn't matter. And actually, I'll note that we don't actually even need the start method, right? Because you create it, there you go, it's created. So now in here, you could do something like set timeout. We'll say tick, comma. So every millisecond it ticks. Something const tick equals. And then we'll do something like last ping.
Is there a reason you're using set timeout instead of the Sinian you mentioned before?
Here it wouldn't be. It's here because this is code that eventually you're going to move into your project. So Synon is something. So the way Synon would work is it actually overwrites set interval in the context of the tests. So when you do that use fake timers, it just says window.setInterval equals my own implementation of set interval.
Okay.
Yeah. Or something like that. And we'll say something like let. We'll do something like if last ping if last ping is less than, or we'll do something like new date. I don't actually remember, but whatever. Is greater than, right, 2000. So it's been going for more than some that. Then do notifications dot last disconnect notification equals disconnected, right? Else and then do at the end set last ping equals null. And I mean, you're running the test the entire time, but I suspect, and I'm sure won't work perfectly, but I suspect something like this would actually solve it, and it's not super slick and nice. Oh, sorry, it wouldn't be that. It would be so it'd be something like that. You'd be close, right, if you did something like that. And now, but what you have now is something that works the way that it makes sense for you for it to work, given the specs that you wrote down, not given the way that your particular code works, right? Actually, it won't be this. It'll be something like pinger.onPing equals new date, something like that, right?
Okay, yeah, but I get what you're saying here. I mean, these are all just the tests for this function, right?
Right, and that's it. And like this is literally the process that I use. I'm like, okay, write that, and then I start figuring out. And the more you do it, the more you kind of figure out how, the patterns for how exactly to do this, where you can do this, over the course of 10 minutes versus over the course of an hour. But even without that, like even if you wrote down those tests in that exact format, that's still useful to you, and then take 30 minutes or something and implement however much of it you can, right? Get a page that implements it somehow. And I think that that's just the simplest way to possibly get started, and also, at least for me, like one of the most useful ones.
I think what you're highlighting there too is like, look, you just coded a whole conference disconnect, reconnect thing in pseudocode.
Yeah,
ties
thanks,
into
George.
all the, yeah, I rather like, I think we can pick some couple projects or ideas, and we start like throwing some time at the end of the brown bag, and that's what we do is code and test like that, and we make it like legit running and stuff, and have it open source so that people can see it, because we all have different styles how we do stuff, and it would be cool to see that all together in a project and learn from each other from that way. I don't mind talking because that's part of the fun of the brown bag, is because a lot of times people are in smaller teams and they don't get to have these conversations, but it's also fun, I think, to see code, and we can talk about TDD, but it's different to have like, hey, this is how we're TDDing this feature, or writing tests for this feature. Is not just us academically saying, hey, you should write tests. It's like, this is how you can do it, and here's a project where we're doing it, and you can watch and participate. So what do you think, George? He's muted. Oh, I can't hear you, dude.
Yeah, I think your microphone's like,
Yeah.
something's wrong with it.
I'll be George. That's a good idea, Jamie. I'm gonna send you all my money.
Hangouts will come. That's what it is. Hey, yeah, no, I like that idea. Do we still want to keep booking speakers occasionally?
Yeah, I think what I would like to see do is we maybe identify some projects, we can talk about it and figure out, but then also book speakers associated with those things. Like, let's say, under the example, suppose we built an API and it did, I know one thing I've talked about, something like conference management or something, or like a time tracking thing or something. We could book speakers who know about the framework we want to work on, maybe who are testing people who can help us write tests on certain features, or maybe they know a lot about like hosting it, and so when we're like, hey, we want to host this somewhere, let's get someone who talks about hosting and likes certain things, and then we go, okay, they'll have maybe a talk prep about how to host these things or their topic, and then we switch over and they can help us move that out. I think that's would be kind of neat. And then once we have certain features up there, like say we have an API that we've put up there and hosted, then that'd be perfect for like when Jed was there talking about Aurelia, we can be like, let's build the Aurelia app for this front part, and we don't have to build all of it, but just as little tiny spikes and this stuff, and see what catches on, what people are interested in, and worse and worse, we have a open source code base of stuff that people can take a look at.
So you want to do a virtual brown bag API?
That's the thing too. Like, we have nothing. Like, we could do a virtual brown bag API to be like, okay, look, we need to have something where like you can get the list of our shows, or right now we have that Google Forms. Like, here's an idea, is how, like, let's build stuff like that. I don't care what it is. It's just working together. We show tools, but then it's also not just tools help us out, but methodologies, and watching someone code something is so helpful too. That's how we can learn a lot. Is like, you learn a lot just by watching you write that pseudocode. Like, okay, this is how George does his work.
Yeah, that was definitely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think that puts a lot of prep work on us that we kind of have to do, but it is going to be useful to a lot of people, so it might be worth making it a priority. Yeah, I think I also don't think we'll be necessarily ready to jump into it right away.
No. Well, that's the thing. It's a long-term play. Like, it's the idea. Like, I would think next time was to discuss a couple ideas, and we discussed before how you gather requirements and how you create. You're showing how you create stories. That's what we could do is say, hey, we want to build a VBB API. Okay, well then let's take 10, 20 minutes and talk through how would we write the stories, and what would we put, and how we set it up. And
why don't we like try to start small and kind of try to do that for like, once every month or something like that, or once every other month, because otherwise I'm worried that we'll do too many. We'll just become showing up unprepared or just burning ourselves out for it. Honestly.
I like coding, obviously.
No,
So,
I like coding, but I think we have to be. Look, here's the thing. That's the sort of thing. Like an hour a week, you're not going to get very far.
no, that's not the, yeah, the point
Yes.
isn't to create. The point is it's a applicable thing that you are creating and testing. Like I showed some tests that mean nothing, and you mocked out the conference call thing, but it wasn't hitting anything. Like putting
What I
something
think
that
you-
means.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, what I think you did, Jonathan, at least for helping me, was that showing me Mocha and how, like, some of the functionality of it. Because, like, the tests, I mean, I have looked into test-driven development and unit tests, and I've seen the, like, 2 plus 2 and what you're supposed to get out.
Yeah.
But, like, actually using that was also very helpful. So.
Yeah. But like I don't want us to, because here's the thing. If we do that, then first of all, like the first 4 sessions going to be the kind of the exact same thing, because there's a practical matter there, right? You need to get past the part where we're defining the API before we start speccing it, and get past the speccing before we start testing it, and get past the test before we start implementing it. So I think we just kind of we shouldn't try to run this on every single session, but I think it would definitely be cool. And
Plus, we can
Okay.
get Claudio to code JavaScript, which is.
Ouch.
I know it happens, but I haven't seen it.
yeah.
Yeah, it has been happening on this project that I'm working on.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to expose different people to different stuff. And yeah, I'm not saying we spec out like a crazy complicated API. I'm just saying we have like one endpoint, and you just code it up, and then
Yeah.
you move
Well,
it
I mean,
on.
we need business logic, but I think we can get some business logic out of the fact that we can have planned meetings and different types of meetings. I think there's some business logic there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could definitely do that and maybe talk about it. Andy, by the way, I didn't see if in the chat he volunteered to like do a TDD session on his conference room booker, which I've seen before. It's actually pretty dang cool. So,
Sounds good. Yeah.
yeah, like we could hit him up to do some of that. And then in the meantime, let's still try to book like a couple of people in the future, just so we don't give up on talking about tech entirely.
Yeah, I've been hitting up on some people, and we'll see if I can get them settled down on a date.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
All right, guys.
We're at the hour.
Yeah, it's a good meeting. So see y'all next week, and let's see if we I'll talk to Andy, see if we can get him next week. That'd be cool.
See you later.
All right, later.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye, guys.